The Spin-Off Podcast Network.
Are you making the most of your KiwiSaver investment? Generate is an award-winning KiwiSaver provider with a track record of strong long-term performance. Making a smart decision now could add tens of thousands of dollars by the time you reach retirement. Book a no-obligation chat with a Generate KiwiSaver advisor today at generatekiwisaver.co.nz/get-advice. A copy of the product disclosure statement is available at generatekiwisaver.co.nz. The issuer of the scheme is Generate Investment Management Limited, and of course, past performance does not guarantee future returns.
I'm Toby Manhire, and this is Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour Government, a podcast in 6 parts.
Doesn't give my opponents much time to run up to an election, does it?
This nation is at risk.
What do you think you're up to now, you perverted little liar?
I could smell the uranium on it as you lean towards it.
There's a radical overhaul in the history of New Zealand's administration.
Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour Government, made with the support of New Zealand On Air. Listen now on The Spin-Off or wherever you get your podcasts.
You work in television, Annabelle. Can we do a reality show in which it's like a merger of The Apprentice and The Bachelor, but it's basically the next big rich person party in which we find the future Gareth Morgan, Kim.com, whatever, and then train them up and catapult them to power, and then just do corruption. Turo, 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 oro mai, aere mai. Welcome to Gone by Lunchtime. Kia orana, Annabelle.
Kia orana. Tēnā koutou. Tēnā tātou.
Hello, Ben.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. We are on a deadline. We don't want to cut into the allotted studio scheduled time for the real pod. So
the other thing is, Fast Pod's a good pod. Get the opinions out there to the masses.
I agree. A fast pod is a good pod.
A lot of people out there who don't know what to think.
O te reo kuki airani. Cook Island language vibes. Kia ora.
Yes. How are the Cook Islands? Well,
oh my God, they are so amazing. Honestly, we don't ever have to talk to Australia literally for the rest of our lives because we've got the Cook Islands and it's far superior in every way. But little interesting anecdote that I heard while I was over there is that they had a really good time during COVID, during the lockdown. They said that the government gave out seeds and everyone got into their gardens and it became like a bit of a competition, like amazing garden growing. In fact, they had so much food they were giving it away on the sides of the road. They loved having their island backed from the tourists and getting to just enjoy it themselves. Everybody pitched in, helped one another out, and they also, all the villagers organised big sporting competitions to keep themselves entertained and stuff. So
you make it sound like some kind of COVID idyll, but weren't people also skint and struggling?
They weren't wanting for food, apparently. They were totally able to self-sustain. The issue that they have now is that once the borders opened, heaps of people left and came to New Zealand, so now they've got an employment shortage. Yeah.
Interesting. The announcement...
So if you're thinking about a winter job to get away from the Auckland malaise,
get
away from the wind, the house rattling winds.
Yeah, that'd be all right, wouldn't it? Have you been watching The White Lotus?
No. I'm saving it.
It's some really quite tense resort vibes going on in The White Lotus, but we're on a deadline. Why am I talking about
Can
The
I
White
just
Lotus?
say,
Yes,
because it was when I walked into the studio this morning, there was a very strong icy slicey vibe that I could feel, little icicles on my heart, because I'm very late today and I'm usually never late, but I'm like profoundly rudely late. I'm half an hour late.
Yep.
Just by way of explanation, if you want your children to have a real Māori education in Auckland, that requires literally driving the Cross Isthmus Challenge every day. So today I had to drive to Newton to drop my schoolgirl off at Te Uru Karaka, then drive all the way out to Te Atatu to drop my baby off at Te Punareo or Manawa Nui and then drive all the way back into town. So all you farmers out there who are getting the reo rammed down your throats, can I say, I wish they were ramming the reo down my kids' throats because they have to drive really far. Maybe you could volunteer your tractors to create a convoy to clear the roads.
That's why they need
so
utes.
I can get here quicker.
That's why they need...
They need to cover tens of thousands of kilometres a week to have the reo shoved down their throats.
Or light rail, a triumph of Western science in order to enable Mātauranga Māori.
Yeah.
We'll get to that, shall we? But let's start on the poll, which emerged, one of those rare gifts from the Palace Politics gods on Sunday on News Hub. And it was kind of fascinating, I thought, in that you had the party of government, Labour, who basically rule alone, losing 10 points. So 10-point loss, 9.7 percentage points down. You had the National Party increase, Judith Collins, the leader of the National Party, increase, and yet it was a bad poll for National.
Yeah.
Explain that to us, Ben Thomas, political analyst and commentator.
So the overall movement was about, 9.3 drop for Labour.
9.7.
9.7 down to, 43. And National were up 1.7, ACT were up 4.2.
Yep.
And Seymour overtaking Collins and preferred PM. That's the second poll.
Had the Roy Morgan also had that. Yep.
No, the UMR one had that.
Oh, big pardon.
Roy Morgan did have Labour down, so we can say that, Roy Morgan, like a stopped clock, was correct that time. It's interesting to think about the flows. It was sort of interpreted as a lot of that support that was going from Labour was going to ACT rather than National. It's hard to tell that from the poll. Often there's some sort of quite complicated sort of under-ocean currents of vote movements. ACT did some polling back in May where they sort of looked at the number of people, the percentage of people who might ever vote for them, sort of, or would seriously consider voting ACT.
This is what David Seymour calls the ACT voting universe.
Yeah, that's right. Yes,
ACT cinematic universe.
Yeah, and it's about 16% of the electorate right now. That's right now that they see that as their sort of upper issue, their upper limit. And of that group of people, about roughly a third of them voted for ACT last time, or probably must work out as a bit higher than that. But of the remainder, it's about 2-1 people who voted National in the last election to people who voted Labour in the last election. So if you took that as still about right, then you'd say that ACT's gain in the last poll was probably about 1.4% from Labour, 2.8% from National. That would mean National took about 4.5 from Labour. And then it sort of adds up. So but there is a question about whether there is that sort of rightward drift from Labour to National, National to ACT, or whether you've got people just swapping over from Labour to ACT, which intuitively doesn't seem right. But when you look at some of those issues like freedom of speech or the hate speech laws, or he puapua, where, you have a lot of disquiet from the kind of cloth cap left, like Chris Trotter and probably Mike Lee. And, it is possible that maybe there is that sort of drift, like sort of.
Sorry, where are those people going? I mean, the Greens went up 1.5, New Zealand First went up 1.5, which is more or less the same as what National went up. So some of that's gone to the people who are like, bring back the handbrake. Some of it's gone, I imagine the Greens have benefited a bit from some of that. Some of it's just general, I'm going to name someone other than Labour because I'm a bit pissed off with them.
But yeah,
but they're not
the question is
on the whole saying National. I mean, I didn't totally follow all of your complex entanglements and the moving of the voters within the kind of centrifuge there. But obviously, Judith Collins and the National Strategists will argue this is a step in the right direction, and that's arguable. But doesn't it suggest that the strategy of going for all those issues, those cultural war issues, some of the stuff that ACT have been prospering on, is a bit of a dead end? Like, we'll go for that centre voter.
I have quite a complex, highbrow, if you will, theory about this poll. And it's Hashtag winter vibes.
Winter
Vibes. Winter vibes.
Yes.
You know, shitty time of year. People are kind of discontented with their lives, cold and miserable,
Also,
and you get a little bit of wriggling around. For me, I think what's interesting is that, by and large, Ardern's support has held up, and there hasn't been a major drop in that. And I think really that, you know, that's what counts.
She's on 45.5, down 2.5, which is still pretty imperious. The winter vibes, that's maybe also, is that linked to a bit of COVID fatigue, a bit of the kind of invincibility shield of the COVID response wearing off a bit? I mean, one argument is that Labour had nowhere else. No, it couldn't go higher. Like in a way it had reached it. So there was a, and yeah, I mean the one of the some other polling, the polling that we did with Sticky Beak, during the recess, found that there was still very high support for the government response. It had slipped a bit, but it was still the people who said it was net positive was 69%, which is still very high. When we asked about the vaccine program, it was only 32%. Now, admittedly, the highest number was in the middle. We don't know a 1 to 5 ranking. 1 and 2 was 32%. The 3, the middle, sort of basically undecided or on the fence or ambivalent or whatever, was the highest number. But it suggests that the direction of travel in terms of the public mood and the response is slipping away a bit.
So are you saying that your results said that people were sort of happy with the way the borders have been managed, but not happy with the vaccine rollout? The sentiment on the overall response was still very high. So 7 in 10 still had a net positive to the overall response to COVID. But when we asked, how do you feel about the vaccine rollout, just over 3 in 10 said they were positive on that. But still, more than 3 in 10 also said they were neutral on it. So it's not like it was disastrous, but it suggests that when you put together the vaccine rollout, the MIQ booking stuff, which is just kind of seems to be snowballing at the moment in terms of the number of headlines around that, whether or not kind of a whole lot of ordinary New Zealanders are exercised by it is debatable. When you put those two things together and a bit of ennui and a bit of what comes next. And winter vibes.
And hashtag winter vibes.
I think this is definitely a vibes poll in terms of coming back down to earth. Like you say, with the MIQ, as far as I can tell, most New Zealanders still desperately intent to keep their fellow countrymen out of New Zealand and tell them to go fuck themselves if they weren't here doing the hard mahi for 7 weeks in March to May last year. Hashtag you don't know what we've been through. And, you know, that sort of provincial ugliness hasn't really abated at all. But And in terms of, you know, say the howl of protest, I don't think that there are that many people who are particularly exercised about areas of national significance in Northland or the Taranaki, you know, or Taranaki rather. But when you add all these things together, the vibe seems to be that actually this is not the all-conquering, COVID-killing Wonder Woman, Amazonian Jacinda and Chris Hipkins / Ashley Bloomfield with a Superman costume under their suit sort of government. Instead, it's the same bumbling oafs who couldn't get Kiwi Build off the ground, who couldn't get light rail built. You know, right now we've got ministers in hiding. Chris Farfoy is in a witness protection program somewhere. He's been relocated to the Alexandra district with a new name and new family to avoid doing interviews about
after the formal apology of the Dawn Rats. He was there. He asked if he could have the mat, please, to go and scurry underneath. Yeah,
that's right. It's one of those things, you know, the ceremonial sort of draping of the mat over Farfoy and then they remove it and he's gone. You know, it's like was that Woody Harrelson magician movie? You know,
hey, do you guys reckon that National is regretting its sponsorship of ACT? Do you think they feel like that's a plan that perhaps is now backfired?
Oh, you mean if they'd killed them off in Epsom? Ben, you're in deep in the weeds.
I mean, you know, the question is, when could they have done that? They couldn't have done that in the last election. I mean, I think
they could have the one before.
In 2017, possible.
2014 for sure.
2014 definitely. 100%. 2014 and 2011. No, I don't think they'll be regretting it because, I mean, look, imagine where National would be now without ACT.
Well, maybe 11% higher because there'd be no alternative.
Maybe New Zealand First would be, though, right?
Well, that's right.
That's the worry. You know, we used to talk about ABC anyone but Cunliffe. Maybe it's anybody but Collins, you know.
You know, there are elements of the New Zealand polity whose vote need to go somewhere. You know, that sort of sick of being told what to do, political correctness has gone mad, you know, angry people in the small town TAB. I mean, better that their votes get channeled into, you know, MPs who give speeches about low tax and less regulation.
Except that when ACT were kind of, you know, more or less a twitching corpse in those years, John Key happily sort of soaked up those votes without banging that drum very hard. You know, I mean, Winston got a fair bit of it too, but, you know, I mean, there is an argument to say that it would be much easier if National could just quietly scoop up their vote without having to, you know, use a megaphone.
Yeah, the other argument, though, is that, I mean, you know, dealing with the world in front of them now, I think it's that preferred Prime Minister stat is a very clear indication that National shouldn't be spending its time trying to consolidate the right because it's just hitting a wall to its right. Judith Collins is not out-acting ACT or
it should be trying to consolidate the centre right.
They should be
reaching to the middle.
They should be heading into the middle. They shouldn't just be contesting those areas
and presenting themselves in a way that I think that, you know, I think that some of the front bench are doing reasonably effectively, which is presenting some alternatives for how because broadly people, you know, you look at those numbers I was talking about before, broadly people support the way that the government has responded to COVID. And so present yourselves at some point in the lead up to the next election as the government in waiting. You know, that's the old cliche, right?
I mean, it's kind of a luxury that that poll that you guys did, and that because the government is doing the main thing, right, which is keeping COVID out, it gives us time to niggle about the other things that aren't going so well, like MIQ and the vaccine rollout. If, you know, Delta was ripping through the community.
Which you kind of, you know, touch wood, like with, you know, the look at the number of use of the contact tracing app and so on and so forth. One of the big days that's coming up is August the 12th. And already the Prime Minister has started mentioning that a bit as if to kind of fend off the pressure from a range of areas in terms of the response, the opening up, the roadmap is going to be talked about.
The announcement of the announcement.
This week. They
did this with the travel bubble last year, didn't they? They announced
the day
when they would be making an announcement
that
we would announce. Yeah.
So they are holding something called the Reconnecting New Zealanders to the World Forum. I understand, on August the 12th. So August the 12th is like next Thursday, and it's when David Skegg's group lays out their findings, and they've been tasked with looking at what sort of level of vaccination will be required to open up, what sort of opening up will look like. We'll start getting into some actual serious numbers about, for example, could we do, if people have got 2 doses of the vaccines that have been approved by MedSafe in New Zealand, would we then say you could do 7 days, you know, do a bunch of saliva tests as well, blah, blah, blah. Maybe you'd start off with doing a certain number of days in MIQ, a certain number of days at home, that sort of thing. And what will be interesting, I think, is to see the extent to which that relieves the pressure on when are we going to be opening up all that stuff. But at the same time, I think there might be a little bit of wind that comes the other direction, which is that I think a lot of people have just sort of assumed that in February next year it'll kind of be normal, and that the findings of this group will make it very clear that in February next year nothing is going to be different.
Yeah, and I think this government is very risk averse on this. You know, And that will be interesting to see how it plays, right? The government has had, the advantage, if you want to call it that, of seeing the entire world burning up with COVID, while we've been relatively unscathed, thanks to a very good response. In 6 months next year, depending, touch wood, hoping that the Lambda variant doesn't sort of again carve up the sort of citizens of the world, the United States will be back to normal. Now, the United States is already largely back to normal. They also are recording, they're getting back to record high case numbers in some areas. But they have, early on in the COVID sort of era, there was a piece, I think it was in The Atlantic, that said, when does a pandemic end? And it either ends when everyone's immune to the disease, or it ends when people decide it's over. And in the United States and the United Kingdom, they've decided it's over. And that idea, if we're not getting pictures of body bags, of overwhelmed hospitals, and instead we're getting pictures of, the Grammys or whatever the ordinary sort of business as usual images from overseas are, how much will that affect people's, tolerance of continuing restrictions? And we don't know that yet.
This is Climate Adaptation.
We are the pōtiki of the taiao.
And the words of those keeping the home fires burning.
It's more than just going along and planting some trees. You got to be able to defend that place to the end of your life.
We have the solutions. We just need to come back to the belief in ourselves as rangatira.
Join me, Nadine Hura, and Ruia Āpirehama, the Ko Papa Ko Rangi Series 2, Ahi Ka. Brought to you by Te Komatu o Te Tonga, the Deep South Challenge, out now on the Spin-Off Podcast Network or wherever you get your podcasts.
Are you curious about how business can be better? I'm Simon Pound, and I host Business is Boring, a podcast where I kōrero with some of the most interesting people in entrepreneurship, commerce, and making things happen. Tune in to Business is Boring every Tuesday, brought to you by the Spin-Off Podcast Network in partnership with Spark Business Lab.
Hey, very quickly before we move on, because it's National Party conference this weekend. It's also the Green Party AGM, but there'll be a lot of attention, I think, on Judith Collins' speech, which will be on Sunday afternoon. Very quickly, what does she need to say? What does she need to do? What's the message, Ben?
I think she needs to tell the party that they're going to change tack, that they're going to knuckle down and hold the government to account, rather than sort of chasing down rabbit holes, trying to invent he pua conspiracies.
No debate demanding. You don't want to demanding of the debate.
I don't think it's, I think they need to, there are so many inconsistencies with this current campaign. Their newest thing is separate justice systems, and they're talking about iwi-led community justice schemes that National helped set up, and, which are actually extremely good programs, and basically provide a sort of, rural Māori equivalent to the diversion scheme, which is a separate justice system for young, white, educated university middle class kids to not be convicted of crimes and to get a second chance.
It's so ironic that they would think that somehow Māori get an easier deal in the justice system. It defies science and Mātauranga Māori to think that. But it's quite remarkable that we're how many months on from the last election?
Nearly a year.
Yeah, and that she, despite everyone talking about the death rattle and the pounding drums that she has endured.
What do you got? Any tips for her for her speech on Sunday, Annabelle Lee-Mather?
Just try and tap into the summer vibes.
Summer vibes? That's a great idea. Just come out to one of the, some summertime
vibes.
On the other hand, the climate of fear in terms of caucus discipline does actually seem to be working pretty well, just in the last few weeks, that it's sort of the purge seems to be working. So maybe she should just get rid of an MP on stage.
Like a ritual decapitation.
Yeah, kind of like, I'd love to, introduce our team to everyone. Every proud member of the National Party caucus step forward. Not so fast.
Okay. Well, we've got a couple of options there. We've got ritual disembowelment of a member of caucus, or a promise to make it summer all year round. 2 tips. Take
barbecues.
them both, if you like.
The farmers will love it. It's beef, it's sausages.
It's the vibe.
It's the vibe.
I want to carry on the theme of vibes, Annabelle. Mātauranga Māori and Western Science. There's a letter in the New Zealand Listener signed by 7 eminent professors objecting to their reading of the curriculum and its requirement for exploration study of Mātauranga Māori and looking at the Western science impact in terms of colonisation and so on and so forth. That created quite a remarkable blowback, including an open letter with 2,000 signatories, including many eminent professors, and the Royal Society didn't like it. The New Zealand Association for Scientists didn't like it. The University of Auckland disavowed it. Last night on The Hui, which is a television program on 3, there was an interview with one of the eminent professors, Michael Kubalis, and he was interesting. I'm bringing this home now. Because he didn't really seem to know a great deal about Mātauranga Māori, but he knew the vibe. He was really understood the vibe of it, and he didn't like the vibe of it.
No, he'd gone into the party, felt the vibe, was a little bit confused by it, and then decided that was not the vibe for NCEA. Yeah. In a nutshell, yeah.
What else to say about all that? You had a panel on after that.
We had Dr. Professor Rangi Mātauranga, who's a Māori astronomer, Melanie Mark Shadbolt, who is Ron Mark's daughter, and of course Tina Ngata, all of whom are experts and practitioners of Mātauranga Māori and of, our scholars and all of that. But interestingly, none of them work in universities anymore because they say that the cultural elitism that, you could read in that letter is all pervasive in our tertiary institutions. And as a result, a lot of Māori academics end up leaving. So, if we're genuine about wanting to encourage more Māori and Pasifika children into science, we also have to create working environments for our academics where their knowledge bodies like Mātauranga Māori aren't being minimised or discriminated against or dismissed by their colleagues.
I mean, the only thing I'd say is Michael Corbalis is a doctor of psychology, so I think it's pretty rich.
One of the
what's his name? Tom
Hiddleston?
No, the Scientology one.
Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise. What would he have to say about Michael Corbalis?
Next week on The Hui, Tom Cruise. One of the points that Rangi Mātauranga said, which I thought was interesting, is that there didn't seem like an awful lot of scientific method in the.
That's right.
That sat behind the letter. But looking at it overall, is when you look at it, it sort of feels like that was a story of last week, and it went through all the cycles, and there was 2,000 people signed that letter. That there's some sense in which the system works. Like, the debate was had.
I don't know. There was
an overwhelming response. There was a sort of disavowal from the formal bodies.
To a degree, but I guess the issue for many who signed the letter is that those people are still in institutions, holding their positions in institutions where they're educating the next generation of educators. And so that's problematic. It's great to disavow or distance your institution from those sorts of sentiments, but when you have people in those institutions who hold those sorts of views and are passing them on to the people who will become the science teachers and all of that stuff, that's problematic. The interesting thing is when you look at what the NCEA working group was proposing, they weren't actually even saying that Mātauranga Māori was science, although obviously a lot of Mātauranga Māori is science. What they were saying is that the new curriculum would analyse and critique the ways in which science was used to rationalise colonisation, and that, you can't dispute that. It absolutely 100% was, not just here, but all over the world. So
lots of people have to die to get beautiful pictures of plants and crosshatch drawings of stalks.
But yeah, it's just strange because it seems like the people who signed the letter didn't even actually read what the working group was saying.
Yeah, it's that we're in defence of science. Well, nobody's attacking science.
Yeah, and they were saying, it's dangerous to question science. We need science to solve climate change, and you're confusing the picture and those sorts of comments. But it seems strange to me that academics who are supposed to encourage critical thinking would then turn around and say, we can't, this shouldn't be in the curriculum because questioning science is dangerous. I mean, if we took that approach, we'd all still be sitting here getting electric shock therapy, when you've got the black dog hanging around.
We've got 2 minutes to go. We were going to talk about the Dawn Raids very briefly. The Dawn Raids, pretty moving event on Sunday at the Town Hall. Is it enough? Some money put into...
it's hard not to tear up when you watch that stuff. Obviously, it was so meaningful to the Pacifica community, and a good reminder that although justice delayed is justice denied, it's actually never too late to do the right thing and to offer an apology. Is it enough? It's a good start. You'll need to follow it up with a whole lot of other stuff. And I think teaching the history of the Dawn Raids in our schools, as part of the curriculum should be mandatory, because if you do that, then you're not going to have ignorant comments like Pacific Islanders are leeches, that sort of commentary coming through when you understand the enormous contribution our Pacifica whānau has made to New Zealand during World War I, World War II, and in terms of being a labour force in New Zealand.
And a number of Rugby World Cups.
Oh my God, amen. Exactly.
In terms of reparations, we just need to we need to send them about half of the All Black team.
Yeah.
And one interesting parallel is if you look at, I think, and it's not the same, obviously, it's not sort of police dogs and Dawn Raids and stuff, but in terms of that sort of idea of kind of ingratitude, I think is it 10,000 people on work visas who have applied for residency in the last year and a half. Their applications were essentially binned about a month ago, and none of the residency applications are essentially not being processed right now. So we're seeing cases like the doctor and the GP in Otaki who's got 1,300 patients in his practice who's leaving because he can't get residency and he can't get his family entry to New Zealand. And, there's something going very wrong in immigration right now, whether it's a deliberate go slow, whether it's like some kind of administrative screw up. But the idea that we're basically living off the goodwill of these people that we are not letting settle here, not giving any kind of permanent guarantees, using their skills during an economic and a health crisis. And in a lot of cases, not even letting their families in to join them. It seems like something that we need more answers on.
We also need more answers on supermarkets, which we were going to discuss, but we have run clean out of time, except to say that they're really expensive. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Te Ai here. Thank you to Spin-Off members. We love you, every single one of you, and we know where all of you live. Kia ora.
Kia ora, I'm Alex Casey, Senior Writer at The Spin-Off. We wouldn't exist without the ongoing support of our generous members. If you're able to, you can make a donation at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
Kia ora, I'm Duncan Grieve, founder of The Spin-Off. You can help us keep all of The Spin-Off's award-winning journalism free for everybody by becoming a member today at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
The Spin-Off Podcast Network.